Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well. In this chance, I am happy to present to you our research results on Kokka Shinto Indoctrination in the Mobilization of Tokkotai forces during World War II. As you know, World War II began in 1939 in Europe after Germany invaded Poland, and Japan became involved on December 7, 1941 for bombarding the US Navy base at Pearl Harbor. After that, Japan quickly began to dominate the Southeast Asian region, which at the time was in the grip of the Western colonial powers. However, in October 1942, there was the Battle of Midway, which was the beginning of the fall of Japan in World War II, after which Japan was forced to apply a defensive strategy in subsequent battles. In October 1944, a Allied force led by General Douglas MacArthur attacked Leyte in the Philippines, which was then under Japanese rule. The Allied forces were victorious, but on October 21, 1944, they were surprised by a new attack from Japan. The attack is a kamikaze attack or Shimpu Tokubetsu Kogekitai. Kamikaze were part of the Special Force or Tokubetsu Kogekitai formed by the Imperial Navy. Tokubetsu Kogekitai are troops who carry out missions by blowing themselves up in the hope of doing great damage with high accuracy on the enemy side. The courage of Tokkotai troops to die sacrificing themselves in fights many occasions. What actually makes them act like that? One of the reasons was the education carried out since the Meiji era and the Imperial script on education. The emperor's power, which was legitimized by the Meiji constitution, was strengthened by the sacralization with the decree. This absolute observance to the emperor is the essence of Kokka Shinto, which contains patriotism and nationalism based on Shinto teachings. From this, a question arises: how Kokka Shinto indoctrinated to the public, both military and civilian, so that they are willing to become members of the Tokkotai force? To answer these questions, research was conducted using descriptive analysis methods and bibliographical research techniques. And the theory used is the theory of religious nationalism by Juergensmeyer, which suggests that a religious nationalism consists of ethnic religious nationalism, ideological religious nationalism, and there's a combination of both. Shinto undergoes many stages from the primitive until the modern phase. The modern phase begins with the restoration of the empire in the Meiji era. This phase can also be referred to as the Kokka Shinto period because of the large share of the government in the Shinto religion. In February 1870, the emperor issued the decree Taikyo Senpu no Mikotonori, stating the government's intention to link government and Shinto religion. The government supports Shinto shrines financially, and people are required to visit the shrines in their vicinity to build pride in Japanese culture and foster patriotism. In 1882, the government divided Shinto into two, namely Jinja Shinto and Shuha Shinto. Shuha Shinto is considered the same as other religions such as Buddhism and Christianity, but Jinja Shinto is considered the roots of Japanese culture, so it gets special treatment. When the Meiji Constitution was passed in 1889, Article 28 stated freedom of religion, but Article 3 stated that the emperor was a sacred and inviolable figure, which implicitly indicated that Shinto was the state religion. Jinja Shinto priests are not allowed to give lectures and so on in state-owned shrines, in other words, the secularization of Shinto into Jinja Shinto. Therefore, the government, in developing the nationalistic moral of society, refers it to educational institutions. It began with the publication of the Imperial Decree on Education in October 1980. This decree emphasized the tradition of venerating the emperor and Amaterasu Mikami, gradually changed its nature into a sacred text that must be protected. The emphasis on the nobility of emperor embedded in legal and educational instruments underlies the high sense of nationalism of the Japanese at the time. Special assault troops are willing to sacrifice their lives because of the indoctrination of Kokka Shinto doctrine, which glorifies the emperor and the state above the individual. The Kokka Shinto doctrine serves as a tool of social cohesion in the formation of Japanese nationalism. Nationalism in this era is religious nationalism. From the aspect of ethnic and religious nationalism, Japan is trying to strengthen the relationship with the citizens and their country by purifying Shinto teachings which state that Japan is a unique chosen nation and is led by an emperor who is the descendant of an embodiment of God since time immemorial. From the aspect of ideological religious nationalism, mythology based on religion is embedded in state law as seen in the Meiji Constitution. State goals such as expansionism were also justified by Shinto teachings of Hakoichi, which was interpreted by the Empire as the 8 cardinal directions under one roof. In 1873, a law enacted military service in Japan for all males aged 20 years. This gives everyone the opportunity to be mobilized in times of need. The mobilization for the Tokkōtai troops was successful because of the indoctrination carried out in both ordinary education and military training. In the field of education, in 1886, the Ministry of Education began to regulate the books used in schools, and in 1910, all books used were books set by the Ministry of Education or Kokka Shinto. These books, especially books on Japanese history and ethics, play an important role in the formation of Japanese nationalism and patriotism. In the story books are told about the origin of the empire from Emperor to Emperor Meiji. Even in the book, the themes of war have been introduced, for an example of which is in the following ethics book. In 1890, the Imperial Decree on Education was published and copies were distributed to schools. Students are required to memorize from grade 2. The text of this decree gradually took on the role of a sacred text that must be respected and protected. The rituals carried out with regard to this decree become a tool to socialize Kokka Shinto to the public, so that they can control the public's perception of their obligation as citizens, namely by obeying these rituals and the Kokka Shinto ritual in general. Apart from education, in military training, elements of indoctrination can also be found. In 1882, an imperial decree was issued for soldiers and sailors. In this decree, it stated that the entire imperial army has been under the command of the emperor since ancient times. And there is a sentence that reads, Kiwa sankoku yorimo omaku, shiwa komo yorimo karushi tokaku giseo, which when translated is that the obligation is heavier than a mountain, but death is lighter than a feather. This sentence implies that completing obligation is the most important thing, even if it means sacrificing one's life. In 1925, military officers were placed in schools. Schools are required to include subjects related to military training. After entering the army, these pilots candidates will experience more severe physical training. At the end of their training period, they will be gathered in a hall and asked to volunteer to be a pilot from the Tokkōtai. Before the pilot Tokkōtai departs on a mission, there are several things that are done to express his last feeling or to increase his confidence in the success of the missions to be carried out. One of the media used is letters. A young officer named Isamatsu wrote this letter to his parents. In addition, before departure, the pilots will be gathered and there will be a speech from the senior officer which is patriotic and praises their courage. After that, the pilot will drink the last sake and depart for the battlefield. Sake in Shinto rituals is something that is often used as a purification medium, so that the pilots who have drunk sake are a symbol that they are ready to die defending the emperor in a holy war. During the war period, especially between 1944 and 1945, many newspaper articles mentioned Tokkōtai. Among them are these two articles. In the first article published by Asahi Shimbun on October 29, 1944, in the same month after Tokkōtai was formed, praising the Tokkōtai troops who protected the country at the cost of their lives to be called a noble and incomparable tactic. In the article published on 7 November 1944, shows the extraordinary success of the troops who took over Ishijima and destroyed 4 enemy ships. And if you do a search on the Asahi Shimbun database with the keyword Tokkōtai, with the time span of October 1944, when Tokkōtai was formed, until August 1945, when the Japanese surrendered, there are 781 articles related to Tokkōtai. This article has tendency to glorify the Tokkōtai troops who sacrificed their lives for the country and the emperor and the success for the mission. This article played a role in building community support for the Tokkōtai mission, even so that the parents of the members of the troops would feel proud if their children sacrificed themselves in the war. From this research, it can be concluded that Kokka Shinto Indoctrination is carried out by secularizing the Shinto religion and constructing it as the root of nationalism, which is then implemented in the constitution, education, and military training, so that the government can easily mobilize the people for the sake of the state, including being part of Tokkōtai. Now, the presentation is coming to an end. Thank you for watching this presentation.